Hey there, Michael here. In today's video, I want to talk about Sony's 360 Virtual Mixing Environment, or 360 VME for short. This innovative system creates a fully personalized virtual music studio environment that you can experience through headphones. If you're familiar with Steven Slate's VSX system, the concept is similar, but with one crucial difference. 360 VME is specifically optimized to match your exact ear and head geometry. And I recently had the opportunity to experience this technology firsthand when Sony visited our campus. They took my personal measurements, and I thought many of you would be interested in hearing about both the measurement process and, more importantly, how well the system actually recreates a genuine music studio experience through headphones. Let me say this up front, Sony's system is, without a doubt, the most impressive virtual mixing environment I've encountered to date. Nothing else I've tested even comes close to matching its capabilities. However, there are some important considerations we need to discuss, so let's jump right in and explore everything you need to know about 360 VME. Let me first talk about what the 360 VME system is before I share my personal experiences with it. At its core, the concept is very straightforward. The system measures your unique hearing experience in a professional music studio and then recreates that exact same experience through headphones using specialized software. While this might sound simple, the complexity, as always, lies in the details. To achieve an accurate virtual reproduction of the studio listening experience, the system needs to account for multiple factors, particularly your individual head and ear geometry, including the specific shape of your ear canals. Understanding precisely how sound travels into your ears and reaches your eardrums is crucial, which is why precise measurements are absolutely essential. Currently, the standard process involves scheduling measurement appointments directly with Sony. These measurements can only be conducted at a limited number of studios worldwide. However, Sony recently expanded into the educational sector, which is why they visited our university's renowned music industry program to perform on-site measurements. This move into education is particularly strategic as educational institutions represent one of the primary target markets for this technology, a point I'll talk about more later in this video. And with that being said, let me walk you through the measurement process. Sony begins by measuring the acoustics of the studio space itself, and while they can handle various environments from basic stereo setups to fully immersive studios with Dolby Atmos or Sony 360 Real Audio, our session was limited to our main stereo music studio since our Atmos studio is still under construction. That said, our main studio is renowned as one of the finest educational music facilities available. The personal measurement process starts with the placement of tiny probe microphones inside your ears. If that concerns you for some reason, don't worry, it's far less invasive than it sounds. The probes are so subtle that you barely notice them and they don't affect your hearing at all. You might feel a slight tickle, but that's about it. The measurement sequence consists of two phases. The first phase captures your hearing without headphones using two types of audio signals, short bursts of white noise, and frequency sweeps, both played from left and right speakers. And while an immersive studio setup would require measurements from each individual speaker, our stereo setup only needed these four measurements, two bursts and two sweeps. The second phase repeats these exact measurements with headphones on, and while technically any headphone can work, Sony recommends their MDR-MV1 model, which is what we used. It's important to note that your personalized profile is tied not only to you, but to the specific headphones used in the measurements. You'll need to use the same model of headphones when using the system later. Different pairs won't work, even if they are the same brand. After both measurement phases are complete, the system takes a brief moment to compute your personalized profile. For that purpose, Sony also takes note of the size of your head. And if you have the Sony MDR-MV1 headphones, you might have noticed that the headphones show numbers on the ear cups, in the extension of the ear cups. And these numbers can be used in order to measure the size of your head. Sony then uses these numbers to get exactly that, the size of your head. What follows next is, in my opinion, the most crucial part of the entire process. They conduct a final test where you sit in the sweet spot while the music plays through the headphones with the 360 VME enabled. First, they verify that you hear the music coming from the actual speaker locations, confirming the accuracy of the measurements. Then comes the remarkable part. They ask you to remove your headphones, and as you do, they simultaneously switch from headphone playback to studio monitor playback. And I have to tell you, this transition was completely seamless. I couldn't detect any difference between the two sources. In fact, I was momentarily confused because I couldn't tell that the sound had been coming from my headphones at all. The switch to studio monitors felt completely continuous. I actually had to ask the Sony engineer if the music was initially played through the headphones. I could not believe that that was actually that accurate. I think that this particular experience proves crucial for the system's effectiveness because it creates a powerful reference point for your brain. Later, when using the system, your brain might struggle with the disconnect between what you see and what you hear. However, you simply close your eyes then, and that takes you back to that studio space and that moment where you took off the headphones and you essentially kind of made that transition from headphone to studio monitors. But before I talk more about this brain disconnect, let me first show you how to use these measurements on your computer to recreate the studio experience remotely. After the measurement session, Sony provides access to the standalone application, which you need for using your personalized measurements. A few days after our session, we received an email containing both the application download and our individual measurement data. The software is available for both Mac and Windows platforms. I'm going to use it on a Mac today. I should mention that the software still has some rough edges that suggest that it is still somewhat in a beta phase. For instance, you might encounter an installation failed message at the end of the installation process, which happened in my case, but don't worry, the software actually installs correctly despite this message. Once installed, it runs reliably in the background without any issues. As I said before, for today's demonstration, I'll be using the Mac version, though Windows users will find the experience virtually identical. So here we have the 360 virtual mixing environment application, and as you can see here, I've loaded up the profile that corresponds to our music studio. This is essentially where you open up the VME file, which contains all the information about the music studio space as well as your personalized hearing profile. Then the first thing that you need to do is you need to set the input and outputs, and the way this works on a Mac, and that is slightly different on a Windows machine, that you have to go into the audio settings, and for the output you select the external headphones, which in my case are the Sony MDR MV1 headphones, and then as the input device you choose the 360 VME audio driver. That is a 16-channel audio driver, and kind of once again for Windows versions or for Windows users this works slightly differently, but it is essentially a virtual audio device that you can then use or can then use as an output in your digital audio workstation, for example. The way I've set it up here is that I've actually routed the main output of my Mac into this 360 VME audio driver, and that will then essentially pass it on to the virtual mixing environment. So if I play Spotify, for example, and you're not going to hear anything, and the reason for that is because I'm not going to, first of all, for copyright reasons, and then obviously you're not going to hear it correctly, so I'm just not going to bother to even kind of play that through YouTube because I'm going to get all these comments. It doesn't sound right. Well, it doesn't sound right because it only sounds right for me. So I'm just going to play the audio here. And that essentially now gives you the input. You have to select what the output channels are going to be for your headphones. So if you are using a more complex studio setup, then obviously you're going to have more output options available. In my particular case, I'm just using the regular headphone output. Now, you have an input monitor. This input monitor shows you what channels are currently receiving audio, and in my case, because once again we only have a stereo measurement here, it's just going to be the left and the right channel. We also see the input levels. We can mute, we can solo the individual channels, and that is pretty much it. Now if you go to the About 360 VME settings, you have a couple of informations here as well, and one of the information here is that they put in is the headband slider position. In my case it's 9 on both sides, so I have actually a really, really big head, so it's almost fully extended. Now down here there are a couple of things that you have. First of all, you actually can change the influence of the space. So if you, for example, want to reduce the room acoustics or kind of the sound of the room, you can actually do that by using the de-reverb portion here. So if I deselect the bypass function, I can actually kind of give it a certain slope. So if I want to have the higher frequencies be less kind of noticeable in the room acoustics, I can do that. I can change the start point of that slope. I can also change the length of that slope, and obviously I can reset that. And that helps if you are in an environment, for example, because the Sonys are open back headphones. So if you are in an environment that has its own acoustics and you want to reduce the kind of this crossover, this conflict between the room acoustics in your virtual studio space and the room acoustics that are from the space in which you're currently using the headphones, you can kind of play around with those things and kind of change that accordingly. And then you also have an EQ section here. So if you want to, so let me kind of bypass this again. If you want to change individual frequencies, if you want to, for example, increase the bass, you can do that by kind of changing that here, and that will change the EQ section. And that is pretty much it. So it's actually really, really straightforward to use. It runs in the background and it works really, really well and very, very stable. And that's really all you need to know in order to use the 360 virtual mixing environment. Let's now discuss the key use cases for this technology. It's important to understand that the 360 VME system requires taking measurements in a professional music studio. Its effectiveness relies heavily on your brain's ability to connect what you hear through your headphones with your memory of the actual studio space. Without this strong mental connection, your brain might struggle to reconcile what it is seeing with what you are hearing, even though the sound reaching your eardrums is technically perfect. The ideal scenario would be taking measurements in a space you regularly use and know well. However, this isn't typically how it works right now, and this limitation has actually sparked some interesting discussions in our Discord community. Quick side note, if you are passionate about immersive audio and want to join these discussions, consider joining our free Discord server. You will find an invite link in the description below. Education emerges as one of the most obvious and compelling use cases for this technology. Consider our situation. We have a high-end studio facility at our college that needs to accommodate hundreds of students. 360 VME offers an elegant solution to this challenge. Students can complete most of the work using the virtual environment and reserve the physical studio space for final refinements, ensuring that everybody gets fair access to our resources. Another promising use case are music producers who need access to their studio sound while traveling. However, there's a catch. This would require measurements taken in their personal studio space, a service that Sony currently offers only to educational institutions. You can take measurements at a well-known studio such as Hit Factory in New York, but it won't be the same as your own studio environment. In my opinion, the technology would also show great potential for shared studio spaces. Similar to the educational model, multiple engineers could work simultaneously on different projects, significantly reducing the time needed in the physical studio space. But while Sony might expand their measurement services in the future, their current limited number of measurement locations for commercial users means that education really remains the primary application for now. So, in case getting measured by Sony is not an option for you, what are the alternatives to Sony's 360 VME? Well, there are several software solutions available, many of which I've covered in previous videos, including Waves NX and various mix room simulations. Only Steven Slate's VSX system approaches the virtualization quality of 360 VME, in my opinion. VSX's main limitations are that it's strictly stereo and not personalized, but if that meets your needs, it's certainly a viable option. Within the context of immersive audio, Genelec's Aural ID system offers an interesting approach. Instead of using direct sound measurements, it creates a personalized experience through a complete video scan of your head, similar to Apple's personalized spatial audio, but with the added consideration of head dimensions. While I haven't personally tested Aural ID yet, I'm very curious about its effectiveness. So if you are an Aural ID user, I'd love to hear about your experience in the comment section below. And then there's the Smith Research Realizer, which takes Sony's concept even further by incorporating head tracking. Like 360 VME, it requires in-ear measurements, but it is hardware dependent, and that makes it less portable than Sony's solution. From what I've heard from Realizer users, their experiences closely mirror my impressions of 360 VME. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to test the Realizer myself yet. The units are built to order and securing a demo unit has so far proven very challenging. Having said that, I'm always eager to learn more about new developments in this field. So if you know of any other similar technologies I haven't mentioned, please share them in the comment section below. Well, that's everything I wanted to share today. Before we wrap up, a quick heartfelt shout out to our awesome new channel members, Maximo Minimo and John Mekniskas. I hope I pronounced you correctly. Your support is greatly appreciated. Thank you. And finally, if you've enjoyed this video, you might want to check out this video here as well. YouTube thinks you will like it. And with that being said, I'll see you all in the next video.